Welcome to Global Business Africa with insights into Africa's ever-changing business landscape. I'm Hannah Viviers in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, where it's 9 p.m. It's 2 p.m. in Washington, D.C., and 2 a.m. in Beijing. Wherever you're joining us from, welcome. Let's start with the look at the markets today. Second day of 2020 and the first day of global stock market trading kicked off on a high today, with most of the bourses we track here closing in positive territory. But it was not so for Egypt's 30 index, which shed 0.4%, while Nigeria's all-share was down about 0.6%. In a bit, we'll be delving a little deeper into some of the major challenges facing Africa's largest economy this new year. For now, though, here's some stories making headlines this hour. Kenya's Equity Bank regional expansion plans hit a snag. Interpol delivers a warrant of arrest for former Nissan CEO to Lebanon. And the UK prepares to formally leave the European Union. Well, let's start global business tonight right here in Kenya, where the country's largest lender by customer base, Equity Group's purchase of 4 regional banks has been delayed. The setback comes after the bank failed to reach a buyout deal with London-listed investment firm Atlas Mara. According to Equity CEO, the binding term sheet has expired as the two parties are yet to sign a detailed transaction agreement. In the share swap deal, Equity will acquire about 62% of the share capital of Banque Populaire de Rwanda and 100% of African Banking Corporation in Zambia, Tanzania, and Mozambique. In exchange, Atlas Mara was to get shares equivalent to a 6.72 stake in the bank. In the meantime, Equity says it will pursue further discussion with Atlas Mara to reach mutually acceptable commercial terms. Well, let's shift focus now to Nigeria, where a financial blow is staring Africa's most populous nation in the face this new year. Nigeria's current debt stock is roughly at 83 billion US dollars. However, given its massive debt service provision, that figure is set to rise to about 22 billion in 2020. Things could worsen for the West African economy if anticipated punches from the global economy like Brexit, the US-China trade war, and interest rate policy of the Federal Reserve Bank hit below the belt. Nigeria's revenue challenge has remained non-responsive in the last 5 years, according to data from the nation's quarterly economic report. That revenue crisis doesn't seem to be getting any better either. Well, Deji Badmas joins us live from Lagos now for more on that story. Deji, thank you so much for joining us. Projections are that Nigeria could see its debt increase by about $22 billion this year. Those are staggering figures, Deji. Are you hearing of concrete plans by the government to reduce the debt burden?
Well, the government is certainly concerned about the debt burden, no doubt at all, but then it continues to give the assurance that there's just no cause for alarm. A few days ago, the Minister of Information also addressed the issue that Nigeria actually hasn't got a debt problem. What Nigeria has is a revenue problem, just as you said in your intro. Nigeria has fallen short of its targeted revenue for the past 3 years now. So the government would paint this kind of picture. It says, look, the debt to GDP ratio, it's within manageable level, less than 25%, but that the problem is the debt service to revenue ratio. So debt to GDP, fine, but debt service to revenue is not coming in as quickly as the government expects. For instance, this 2020 budget is a deficit budget. The government would certainly borrow about a quarter of the money now it needs to fund the budget. Now, let's talk about the $22 billion you just mentioned. Well, the government says, look, this money it intends to borrow would be tied to projects. It's not as if the money would be used for recurrent expenditure, to pay salaries and all of that, but that the monies will be tied to projects, and that, look, the loans are going to come from concessionary sources that are cheap, and that they'll be tied to projects. And some of these projects are actually supported by the African Development Bank, the China Exim Bank, for instance, the German Development Bank, quite a number of the banks. So the government, what the government is trying to say is that, look, yes, $22 billion is huge, but that, look, it has a huge infrastructure deficit problem it needs to address. And there are two ways to address it. It's either you borrow or you try to raise the money. Revenue is not coming in. At this moment, it's difficult to increase taxes, difficult to print money, for instance. The government is looking at inflation. So that is the reason the government is concentrating on borrowing. And because these funds that are coming in now, I mean the debts now, they are tied to infrastructure projects. The government says there's just no cost to worry. But of course, certain people are definitely worried.
Yes, because if you're earning less money than what you're borrowing, and essentially in that ratio that you're talking about, it does become a problem. But Deji, some analysts argue that Nigeria is headed to an economic crisis, but the world wasn't paying enough attention to it, and that's one of the articles that came out last year from Forbes magazine. Is that the reality on the ground, Deji?
Well, it's difficult to say. It depends on what side of the divide you are. The government would tell you that there's nothing like that. But it's easy to understand that if the situation, the economic situation in the country is not well managed, the country could be heading to an economic crisis. Because let's face it, look, the other day, the head of the Tax Revenue Service here, the FIRS, came out to say for the past 2 years now that the Federal Inland Revenue Service has not been able to meet its revenue target. Some government agencies have been collecting taxes, not remitting. So in terms of revenue, because the government has not been able to meet up to its targeted revenue, and if it continues that way, there's certainly going to be a challenge. So it's the reason why the government says it is doing all it can to diversify the sources of its revenue away from oil now, looking at non-oil sources. But unfortunately, things are not adding up as quickly as everyone would expect. So yes, the reality is that if things are not carefully managed and Nigeria does not work on its revenue sources and try to boost this revenue, then there's a certainty that the country might be thrown into an economic crisis, despite the loan it intends to get. Because, look, you look at the budget. What is actually budgeted for debt servicing this year is quite huge, about a quarter of the budget. So it's like the government will be spending so much servicing debt. And it's certainly a problem. The government knows this. The government realizes this, and it blames it on revenue. So how quickly it's able to address the revenue problem, the better for the economy.
And some investors or some analysts saying that this is actually scaring investors from Nigeria, even though they do see value in investing in that economy. Deji, last year Nigeria, in an attempt to stop the smuggling of goods and boost local trade, it closed its borders with Benin. On the one hand, it was reported that the move boosted government revenues, but on the other hand, it fueled inflation, and in some cases even caused shortages in some of the staples for Nigeria. Do we know if the borders will be reopened?
Hannah, I'm sorry, I can't hear, but if I got
January?
your last question correctly, you're talking about the closure of the border.
Yes.
Quite well, I would say there's been some kind of gain and there's been some kind of loss. No doubt, we've seen inflation go up, and if the issue is not resolved as quickly as possible, some people are predicting that inflation could go further up. But we're not so certain if the borders will be reopened by January, but that's the hope, that's the intention. The Nigerian government and, of course, the government of Benin Republic and Niger actually set up, a bilateral team, so to speak. That bilateral team has been able to identify all the problems, and what we're being told is that those problems are being worked on. So there's every chance that by the end of January, the border will be reopened. If the border doesn't get reopened by the end of January, then we might be looking at around February. But of course, Nigeria is under enormous pressure from its neighbors now to reopen the borders. And quite a number of Nigerians too, especially traders, would want to see the borders reopened, because as we speak, the economy of the border communities now is completely dead. And those border communities would want to see the borders reopened and this problem sorted out once and for all.
Thank you
Hannah?
so much, Deji. Deji Badmus joining us live from Lagos. Well, like many other developing countries, Malawi has a youthful population, but among the majority who are unemployed, many are forced to find alternative solutions for work. Youth groups across the country are recycling scrap aluminum metals to produce kitchenware. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy brings us more.
From the molten material, the youth fashions pots, spoons and frying pans, which many customers describe as durable. The skills needed to produce useful tools out of scrapyard metals are easily transferable. Just like that, the boys who suffered the pangs of youth unemployment are breaking the mold.
I started this workshop alone, but I later on thought it would be a good idea to share my skills with other youth who are interested to learn new skills, and now we are growing in number. I see a bright future for these young boys.
Job creation for Africa's youth remain an uphill struggle, as 2 out of 5 economically active youth remain unemployed in most countries across the continent, including Malawi. According to the International Labour Organization, unemployment affects 1 in 4 Malawians aged below 35 years. The youthful entrepreneurs buy disused car engine heads, rims and other redundant aluminum parts. The metals are heated to melt in a traditional oven. These youths have not only created employment for themselves, they have created employment for middlemen who order and resell the pots to different parts of Lilongwe city and surrounding districts.
I need money for my tuition, so instead of sitting at home doing nothing, I come here to learn.
You are seeing the young of us, they have a benefit because of this way. Instead of going, staying where like gambling, stealing, begging in the streets, they can come and training this. After that, they can find the benefits because of this way.
The factory uses files to shine the outer side and small knives to smoothen the interiors. Everyone has a role to play. These young men in the outskirts of Lilongwe are gaining valuable skills and an economic lifeline that is making a difference in their lives.
This job may not be the very best, but it has helped me put food on my table. I am able to pay my house rent, buy clothes and other necessities in life.
Despite the positive stride the youth are making, liquefying the metals consumes large amounts of charcoal, a phenomenon which is wiping out forests in the outskirts of the city. But the young entrepreneurs are looking forward to the day they will upgrade to cleaner and environmentally friendly sources of energy for heating up the metals they rake from the streets. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Lilongwe, Malawi.
Well, Ghana, like many other African countries, is grappling with a plastic waste crisis. The country is yet to ban single-use plastic products, but efforts are underway to address the problem. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rafa reports from Accra.
Plastic pollution on Accra Beach. According to the United Nations, Ghana produces 1.7 million tons of plastic waste annually. Only 2% of it is recycled, meaning that a lot ends up in the environment. Senna MFA Zaglo started producing handmade paper bags last year to tackle plastic pollution in Ghana.
We buy food a lot by the roadside, and a lot of these food vendors prefer to use rubber bags or polythene bags because it's quite cheaper. And that is one of the reasons why there are a lot of rubber bags around.
Senna MFA says plastic bags are becoming unpopular due to the dangers they cause to the environment and aquatic life. However, many Ghanaians are yet to wholly embrace paper bags for their shopping.
Paper bags are a bit expensive as compared to polythene bags, so it's gradual. They are not embracing it altogether.
These paper bags cost between 35 cents and $1.20. Senna MFA Azaglo produces 200 paper bags a day. She hopes to get that daily number up to 1,000 as the business expands. But some environmental experts say switching to paper bags may not entirely solve Ghana's plastic pollution.
When it comes to paper bags or alternatives to plastic bags, I believe that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. So the idea is to first of all refuse to take the plastic. So if you go out there to buy something, try and refuse taking plastic bags. Now if you can't refuse the plastic bag, then you need to reduce how much of it you take. In as much as possible, you want to reuse what you have already taken.
Over 15 African countries have either banned or taxed the use of plastic shopping bags. But Ghana's government says it has no plans to ban plastics due to its contribution to the economy. Sena Emefa Zaglo, however, hopes when the government bans plastics, the mass production of paper bags will help bridge the economic gap. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break and return. Interpol delivers a warrant of arrest for former Nissan CEO to Lebanon. And Tanzania's revenue authority exceeds its revenue collection targets for the first time.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Well, Lebanon has received an Interpol arrest warrant for ousted Nissan boss Carlos Ghosn. The French-Lebanese tycoon, who had been under house arrest in Japan over several counts of financial misconduct, escaped in mysterious circumstances and arrived in Beirut on Monday. The request was received by Lebanon's internal security forces and has yet to be referred to the judiciary. The Lebanese presidency has denied reports that President Michel Aoun had welcomed fugitive former Nissan boss. Ghosn's ability to jump bail has led to a Japanese investigation into what is seen as an embarrassing security lapse. Ghosn has repeatedly denied all charges against him and said that he fled to Lebanon to escape what he called a rigged Japanese justice system. Well, during the end of the year winter holidays, tens of thousands of Chinese tourists chose Tunisia. The North African country has become one of the favorite destinations for Chinese travelers in this special period of the year. They're attracted by the cultural and historical riches of Tunisia. The country has 10,000 historic sites and museums. CGTN's Adnan Shiwashi brings us more.
Raf is a Chinese traveler who's visiting Tunisia with his friend. Unlike millions of tourists who come on organized trips, the adventurer booked the flight and the hotels online and made his own tour of the country.
I've been in Tunisia for a week. I spent one day in the capital, then I moved to the beautiful island of Java. The people here are very kind and the cost of the stay is not high. I prefer Tunisia to Europe for holidays.
Some Chinese visitors like to stay at wonderful guest houses where they have an authentic experience.
I'm discovering Tunisia for the first time. The transport is available. We can move easily across the country. I've chosen quiet places for this special period.
The Ministry of Tourism has prepared a special program for visiting Chinese travelers this year. Exploring the ruins of ancient Carthage is still one of their favorite activities.
The Rome-Carthage tour is fantastic. Chinese travelers like to discover these two Mediterranean civilizations. They often visit Italy, then Tunis or vice versa to learn about the history. Chinese tourists are among the best visitors who care about art and culture.
According to official data, the number of Chinese visitors has quintupled since 2010 to more than 20,000 tourists until the end of December, against 5,200 tourists during the same period of 2010. According to the Tourism Department, 9,550,000 tourists have visited Tunisia in 2019. This represents an increase of about 1 million travelers compared to 2018. Tunisia's tourism earnings hit $2 billion, posting a growth of 36.6% in the same period. Aden Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
The Tanzania Revenue Authority says it has collected over $864 million in taxes for the month of December 2019. It says this is the highest amount collected in the country's history. Officials at the authority say that it has surpassed its December target by 100.20%. Well, Richard Kayombo is the Acting Director at Taxpayer Services and Education. He joined us now from Tanzania. Thank you so much for joining us. Richard, let's just start with what has been done differently this year to lead to this increase that we saw in December.
Actually, we've done quite a number of things. One of them is re-engineering the processes of our revenue collection by putting up processes that are convenient for our taxpayers and enabling them to pay their taxes conveniently or also voluntarily. But we've also been working closely with various business groups that really matter in terms of ensuring that taxpayers are listened to, and we engage them in a number of ways to ensure that we listen to their concerns and address them immediately to ensure that they do not have any reason for not paying on time. But in addition to that, we've tried to close all the possible loopholes of revenue leakages, especially in terms of smuggling. We had a bit of smuggling in the past, and we tried to work around that to fix that, and that has helped us also to gain more revenue collection, not forgetting the fact that we're trying to employ a lot of technology in the various parts of our revenue collection processes to ensure that we make it easier for people to pay instead of wasting a lot of time walking down to our offices to try to pay this or ask for that and so on and so forth. They can do most of the things on their own at their offices or their businesses without having to waste a lot of time coming around.
I want to speak a little bit about what challenges the authority faces and what can be done to solve them, because we have seen the success, but as you say, there are some loopholes and there must be other challenges that you are looking at. Speak to us about some of those and what you're doing to be able to continue, as you say, to see some progress in this area.
There's been a couple of challenges. One of them was the fact that we had challenges with the tax base, which we're trying to resolve by ensuring that we create a convenient way of registering new taxpayers, but by making taxpayer registration online so that anybody can be registered wherever they are. And this has brought a number of taxpayers on board that were not initially registered. Also, we've gone ahead to try to work with the various government departments in different levels, and this has given us a lot of good results, because at every level we've got at least some support from the top level, the ministries, the local government. This helps us to identify the businesses that are operating in a particular area, but also helps us to conveniently get all the business communities together when we need to talk to them, so that at the end of the day everybody understands what their obligations are, and also talk to them in a way that makes them feel they are partners rather than enemies, and this is creating a lot of value in terms of increasing revenue collection.
Well, we have seen that the authority has been making efforts to digitize its services so as to increase the efficiency, and I suppose this is one of the things that you were probably alluding to when you were talking about that ease of making it easier for your citizens to be able to file their taxes. But the new online auctioning platform is one of these new innovations. Could you just speak to us a bit about that?
Yeah, the online auction is a new innovation that just started today, the 2nd of January. We've been working on this because there have been a lot of challenges, especially when it comes to goods imported in the country that people fail to sort of get out of the port for some reason or another. Some people could not probably pay for the goods on time, or for some other reasons, say they have had challenges with cash flows and so on and so forth, and we end up having goods piling out of the port or at some of the entry points. We normally give a 90-day period for people to get the goods cleared, and we also give a 30-day ultimatum by giving notices, but still some goods were remaining at the port and cleared at the border stations. Now, what we resort to, according to the East African Customs Management Act, it allows us, after a period of 120 days, then to auction these goods. We initially had these face-to-face auctions, which had challenges because the condition for the auction was for somebody to come to pay the 25% of the bid price immediately after winning. And that posed a lot of challenges, because coming with cash at that particular place was a bit of a challenge, risky also for both the bidders and ourselves. Now we found that, and it was not even participatory enough, and it didn't cover a lot of people because only people were around Dar es Salaam who could participate. Now with the online auction, it allows anybody who can get access to any communication equipment that allows them to join to get the internet, to be able to bid from wherever they are, any part of the country. And that allows more people to participate. And in the past also, we didn't have the reserve prices indicated in advance, and that limited the choices for the people to determine how much they would really bid. And it also caused problems and complaints for people thinking that probably it was a bit restrictive in a way if they didn't win. But we've saw that by making sure that we have a reserve price, but people can bid online, they can see what the other people are bidding on particular lots of goods, and that has made it convenient and more participatory for everyone to be able to see that it's very transparent and fair.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Kayombo. Mr. Richard Kayombo, he's the Acting Director of Taxpayer Services and Education. He was joining us live from Tanzania. Well, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and Tan Jian, the Chinese ambassador to Ethiopia, have visited the construction site of the Beautifying Sugar project. The initiative aims to develop Addis Ababa's river systems and surrounding areas. It's part of the Prime Minister's plan to clean up the city, generate jobs, as well as build service and green economies. The project envisions building parks, bicycle paths, walkways, planting of trees, and development of urban farms. At the request of the Ethiopian government, the Chinese government agreed to provide grants to develop central parts of the project. The first stage of the initiative is expected to be completed in May 2020.
We have started this project 3 months ago. Within this short period of time, no one expected to see such huge progress. This could be a great model for us on how to execute such mega projects timely. This place is crucial in connecting the overall Beautifying Sugar project and changing the image of Addis Ababa.
The Chinese government has agreed to provide the financing of this project, and we see this as a friendship project between our two countries. So this year marks the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations. So this is a friendship project, And I believe that with a project like this, our relations will be further enhanced. And people visiting here, people touring here, they will appreciate the friendship and the contribution by the Chinese government.
Well, Traders of Africa, better known as TOFA, is focused on developing an online marketplace for goods and services originating from the continent. The firm has engaged over 9,000 merchants spread across the continent. CGTN's Penina Karibe caught up with TOFA's founder for a conversation about the trading environment within Africa.
Africans have always been entrepreneurial. That's one thing. You must give it to Africa. Every Africa wants to make it. It's even a problem, because everybody wants to be the boss. Nobody wants to serve, to help others grow. It's also a problem, and that's why you see everybody wants to be a leader, nobody wants to be a follower. It's a problem in Africa as well. Maybe that's one of the reasons why China and all these other countries grow, because you see people who are very okay to be followers, and they help you grow. They come to your business, and they help you grow. But what you see in Africa is that you're an entrepreneur, you employ someone, the person is in your office, and what he's thinking in his head is to take your business and run with it. So you're bringing strategies, he's copying it. It's happened to me too, as young as I am in TOFA. Okay, so that's also a problem. So, but we're all entrepreneurs. The thing is, how are we able to translate our vision into the other entrepreneurs' vision, so that they see what you're doing as their dream? I'm willing to stay and work with you.
Entrepreneurship is about creating solutions to the challenges that the people are facing. Now, which areas in the continent should entrepreneurs focus on to achieve that?
It all depends. You see, the truth of the matter is that I'm in Lagos, Nigeria, right? And I started TOFA because of granules. And that's the problem I faced that time. In the process of doing it, I saw the problem others were also facing because of trust. I created SOSPRO to solve that thing. I saw that funding was also a problem because of payment terms. I created ATI. And like I said, we are still open. Any issue I see that inhibits trade, because that's the sector I have decided to work on, we're willing to work on that and solve that thing. That's on one side. You have a farm. If you're working on your farm and you see a challenge, you're going to innovate on that challenge and solve it. In trying to solve it, you may not have all the answers, but you know me, so you may call me to say, Uju, how is this, how is this? And then I'm saying, oh, I don't know, but let me ask, or have you tried this? You try it, it works. You're also talking to someone else. So when someone else wants to do whatever you're doing, they're not going to start from the scratch that you have started. They already have a pedestal, which is what Jack Ma has given us, okay? And then the person builds from there, all right? And then another person that is doing something different, maybe working in marketing, sees the challenge in marketing and then solves that problem. Eventually, I, in TOFA, need to do something on marketing. I'm connecting to the solution somebody else has created in marketing, and I'm working with him. I need to do something with a farmer, and I realize, oh, there's someone in Kenya that I know that has done something that I'm marketing. I didn't innovate. I didn't create it. You created, he created. Well, I'm using them. That's the connection. That's how it will work.
Right. So it is often said that for any place to have that conducive, thriving entrepreneurial environment, governments must also do their role. And now we have the African Continental Free Trade Area. Do you see that as creating the solutions that are needed to create that environment?
I think the government have tried. The Continental Free Trade Agreement is a very good step in the right direction. But I still believe that it's not the government that will do that. It is us, it's me and you. That's the truth. So how do we move things along? How can we start talking? What do we need? It is still the private sector that will build that.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. More news making headlines in the world of business, including the UK prepares to formally leave the European Union, and German automakers face tougher emission standards this year.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
Pirina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed.
And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Well, let's take a look at stories that are making headlines. Just to recap there, Turkey's parliament has approved a bill to deploy troops to Libya in support of the embattled United Nations recognized government of national accord. The decision has paved the way for increased military cooperation from Turkey, despite criticism from opposition legislators. The African Union says those opposing the election results in Guinea-Bissau should do so through use of legal means only in order to maintain peace, law and order. Former Guinea-Bissau Prime Minister Umaru Sissoco Embalo has been elected president after winning a runoff vote against another ex-prime minister. Domingos Simoes Pereira complained of fraud and told his supporters that at some polling stations, the number of votes exceeded the number of registered voters. And finally, at least 3 people have been killed and 3 others injured in a suspected Al-Shabaab attack near Kenya's coastal town of Lamu. The incident took place on Thursday at the Nyongora area. Lamu County Commissioner Irungu Macharia says the attack was targeting a bus which had come from Mombasa and was headed to Lamu. The driver of the ill-fated vehicle refused to stop and sped off, forcing the militants to shoot at the bus several times. And that was a recap of stories making headlines this hour. Well, let's shift focus now to Brexit matters. The UK's Parliament has given approval for British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's divorce deal. The move paves the way for a January 31st departure from the European Union. However, as our correspondent Andrew Wilson now reports, the bigger challenge ahead of Johnson is uniting a divided Britain.
A new decade with a new government and the extraordinary twin tasks of leaving the European Union and restoring public faith in politics. The projected economic growth figures are weak and UK industry has been hit by 3 years of uncertainty. There is much to do.
We have already seen Boris promising to fulfil his manifesto pledges on the NHS, on the environment, on housing and police. But he is also now promising to invest money outside of the wealthy capital and southeast and into the severely neglected infrastructure and jobs of the rest of the country, who are now his new electorate.
But perhaps the biggest challenge is the Brexit timetable. On January the 31st, ratification of the Downing Street deal should be complete, ending 47 years of EU membership. By March the 1st, talks will begin in earnest, a fight on both sides for a new trade agreement to form the core of the new relationship.
There was some expectation post-election that Boris Johnson might defy Conservative hardliners and soften his position on Brexit, go for a more closely aligned free trade agreement with the European Union. But not only is Downing Street talking up what it is calling a clean break, but the Prime Minister himself has ruled out any possibility of an extension, insisting by year-end 2020, success or failure, the job will be done.
In June, there will be a summit for the UK and EU 27 members to assess progress, if any.
Where is Britain's place in the modern world? Is it going to be a deal which more or less keeps Britain within the satellite of the European Union? Or are we going to strike out a very different road? And here I would suggest that, maybe one of the things that's lacking is any vision about where Britain is going to go. Not just tagging along with the United States, but for instance, in relation to India, in relation to China, in relation to other emergent economies.
By November the 26th, the European Parliament will expect a trade deal, negotiated, translated and presented, ready for ratification by the end of the year. If by December the 31st this isn't forthcoming, Britain crashes out and falls back on basic WTO terms. tariffs on goods, and little or no special border cooperation. This would be the no-deal scenario that Boris Johnson pledged to avoid.
Well, staying in the UK, for the first time ever, clean energy sources provided more electricity in Britain than fossil fuels last year. The figures by the National Grid for 2019 come as the UK looks to take a global lead in tackling climate change. With more on this, here's CGTN's Nawid Jabrakel.
The winds of change are blowing here in the UK. 2019 was the first time on record when clean energy provided most of the country's electricity. Almost half came from renewable sources like wind, solar and nuclear power. 43% came from fossil fuels like coal. Back in 1990, just over 2% of Britain's power supply came from clean energy, with almost 3/4 generated from coal.
Britain built its first coal-fired power plants back in the 1880s, and in the century that followed, coal was central to its rise as an economic power. But in recent years, the shift to renewable energy has gathered pace. It's been driven by technology, but there's also growing political will here as pressure mounts on the government and businesses to become greener.
Last year, the UK became the first major developed nation to commit to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. National Grid, which runs the UK's energy systems, says it plans on investing more than $13 billion in gas and electricity networks over the next 5 years. And the UK government has welcomed the latest figures. But there are also warnings that more needs to be done to protect the environment. Last week, the head of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, called for less investment in fossil fuels to tackle what he called a global climate crisis. Luigi Barkil, CGTN, London.
Makers face tougher emission standards this year, and many are speeding up the production of greener vehicles to avoid hefty fines. CGTN's Tony Waterman reports from Frankfurt.
For years, bigger was better. Revved up engines, faster cars, premium technology. It's a model which drove German automakers like BMW and Daimler to the apex of the global luxury auto market. But as tougher emission standards roll out across Europe in 2020, it could prove their ultimate weakness.
The Germans are not well prepared. They offer so many premium products, so many expensive cars, so many cars with huge engines. This is now a problem.
Under the new rules, manufacturers have to slash their fleet's CO2 emissions. New vehicles will have to average about 24 kilometers per liter of petrol and 28 kilometers per liter of diesel. If automakers miss the targets, they face hefty fines.
Roughly speaking, I think it costs them 5 to 10% of the earnings. I think Volkswagen has the biggest chance to make it, but still I think Volkswagen will miss the targets, and BMW and Daimler even more so.
The new emission standards are part of a bigger strategy to make Europe carbon neutral by 2050. Transport currently accounts for nearly a third of the bloc's total CO2 emissions, so electric vehicles need to play a starring role for the plan to work. Uptake, though, has been slow. Electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids have a market share of just 3%. That needs to quadruple to meet the new standards. Subsidies have helped shift sales into high gear, but they come at a cost, both to governments and automakers.
When you look at the example of Norway, where the market share of electric cars is more than 50% in new passenger car registrations, there the subsidy regime is up to 20,000 euros depending on the car.
Experts say subsidies are not a long-term solution, and once removed, demand tends to plunge. So for now, German automakers are weighing whether it's cheaper to subsidize electric cars or pay the penalty as they rush to release dozens of new, more environmentally friendly models. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Frankfurt.
Well, shifting to the Middle East now, the ongoing protests in Iraq have left more than 250 people dead and are taking a huge toll in the economy. The protesters are demanding jobs and an end to what they call government corruption. Iraqi Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi has warned that the unrest is only making things worse as it's costing the economy billions of dollars. One particular industry that has taken the hardest hit since the unrest began is the private sector. This as businesses face losses from disruptions of markets to merchandise damages. However, critical revenue producing oil exports are continuing However, foreign investors have pulled out of a number of energy deals. Mobility technology looks set to be a top trend at the Las Vegas Gadget Show CES 2020. Startups from France will be showing the latest e-bikes, solar-powered vehicles, and life-saving transport technology. CGTN's Terry Wangari has more.
This e-bike has been turning lots of heads lately. It's the latest carbon fiber bicycle from high-end French maker Colin. The bike communicates with the rider's smartphone. Soon, it will be able to display GPS navigation signals on the small dash screen.
We just use a smartphone and we put the destination on the smartphone, and then we can see navigation on the display. We have integrated a translative display. That means that more sun there is, more you can see it. It's really interesting when you ride all the day.
This particular machine, with its leather hand grips, pedal brake discs and GPS technology, costs around $6,500, making it more expensive than most motor scooters and some motorbikes. The range of Colin is between 80 to 100 kilometers on battery alone. Obviously, such an expensive bike is also going to catch the eyes of thieves, so security is taken very seriously.
So, the first thing is that you have to protect an e-bike, a bicycle. You can't avoid completely the e-bike to be stolen, but we use an anti-theft system, so GPS tracking inside. Then you can track it in real time to find it if it's stolen.
At CES in Las Vegas, Colin will launch a new model priced at $5,450. Gary Shapiro, who is the president of the Consumer Technology Association that organizes the CES, says France has a thriving tech scene.
France is a very sensuous country with the five senses: the perfume, the food, the wine, the art, the design, everything they do is very creative. Plus they have a very highly skilled population, and they have government leadership from the very top with Emmanuel Macron that's focused on CES, that's focused on innovation, and focused on turning these smaller French companies into bigger companies.
Cyclists and motorcyclists have been wearing lights to help them be seen by other motorists for many years. But traditional lights lack the sensors and connectivity of Cosmo's range. The technology can also detect if the user has been involved in an accident and notify up to 3 friends, sending messages to their smartphones and providing the GPS coordinates of the incident.
The lighting technology integrates 96 LED, 48 red and 48 orange. It's connected in Bluetooth with your phone and also with a remote control that enables you to manage different lighting modes. There is a geometer and accelerometer inside the device, which is independent from the vehicle. This is a technology to save lives, yes, because by alerting in less than 3 minutes, it alerts the emergency services in case of an accident or your friends. So it can save your life because we know that in case of an accident, every minute matters.
The Las Vegas Gadget Show CES 2020 opens on the 7th of January, with media previews beginning on the 5th of January. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
On the commodities market, again, a positive sentiment was a general trend on the markets today. Crude oil saw a slight increase of 0.3%. Platinum saw the biggest gains among precious metals today. It was up just over 2%. Those were your commodity markets. Well, now let's take a short break. When we return, young graduates train as pastry chefs as state jobs dry up in Libya.
Don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Well, for many, going to university and nailing down a field of study-related job is a dream goal. However, that ambition doesn't resonate with a handful in Libya. CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar now explores how more and more university graduates in the northern African nation are resorting to work in the private sector as the state jobs dry up.
By the looks, Belghazim Abdussalam seems to be enjoying baking cakes. But the reality here is far from it. After several attempts at finding a job in Libya's oil industry, Abdussalam had to give up on his dream. Instead, the engineering graduate took a pastry course at a private training center. He's now a full-time worker in this busy Benghazi cafe.
If I had worked based on what I studied, I would have worked as a petroleum engineer.
When asked of what he thinks of being a pastry chef, well, Abdussalam's answer was a sentiment for all in Libya.
It is a much better and stronger source of income. You can't rely on a government salary here. It doesn't do anything.
Most Libyans are civil servants. However, the state has been hiring less as it continues to be engulfed by the raging conflict. Jobs in the sector have also become scarce over the years as foreign companies exit the northern African nation. For now, training centers like Sarah Bashir al-Zawi's are a common sight across Libya as they try to improve the lives of many, particularly the youth. As an accounts graduate herself, Sarah's story isn't that different from her students.
I graduated with a BA in accounting 8 years ago, but didn't get a job. 4 years ago, I launched this project. I imagined that if I had waited for the state to employ me, I would have stayed at home for 8 years. That's why I support the idea of youth standing up for themselves instead of waiting for a $500 salary without taking any steps.
With a Bachelor of Arts in Economics, another alumnus of this confectionery course is 30-year-old Nabil Muhammad al-Mabrouk. Nabil started his own cake business to supplement his father's state pension of just about $321. For him, making 3 or 4 cakes is equivalent to half of a state salary.
I didn't benefit anything from my BA in economics. I applied for work in many banks, but I wasn't successful. I haven't benefited from the state either. These hands of mine are what gives me my income.
Libya's private sector has a long way to go before it can provide enough jobs for all. But for the likes of Nabil and Abdussalam, little places like pastry centers could help many make a decent living. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
There's been an increase in oversight on traditional medicine by some African governments. The move comes in a bid to standardize varying treatments and eliminate fake practitioners. CGTN's Daniel Kijo brings us more.
This may look like just dried leaves and dust, but to Turkia Saloom, it's a treatment for abdominal pain. A mix of 3 different herbs and leaves. She has been a traditional healer for almost 2 decades and says she's eager to help many more patients.
I did my research and found that those who use traditional medicines live longer as compared to those of us who live in urban areas. These are people who haven't even used a Panadol. All their medication is traditional. That's why I decided to do this business.
Treatments like these are all that's available to people in many parts of the developing world. They're used to treat a variety of conditions, from epilepsy to malaria. Many traditional healers admit that prescription for African traditional medications tend to be secretive. They're based on knowledge passed from generation to generation of healers. But sometimes this can lead to vague doses and possibly unknown side effects. To protect people who use traditional medicine, Tanzania has developed a registry for practitioners.
The costs are really high. To register one medicine is $300, but we are in the process to talk to our leaders.
Tanzania is one of the many countries that has begun regulating traditional medicine. According to the World Health Organization, more than 50% of the 194 member states has a national policy on traditional medicine. In Tanzania, the government does not dictate healers' methods, but it sees the registry as a first step towards quality control.
It has to be controlled, and the governments that are currently, our government the same is doing the same, ensure that whoever says that has a product that heals something has to go through the formal way to be registered.
The government has approved 5 herbal medicines now being used in public hospitals across the country. It's a plan to integrate the best of traditional and conventional medicine so that both systems can work together to help tackle the health challenges of the 21st century. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Travel is an undisputed way to broaden one's horizons, and in 2019, some travel destinations called to those seeking a bit of out-of-the-ordinary adventure. Let's take a look at how.
2019 was the 20th anniversary of Harbin Ice and Snow World, a freezing fantasy in China's most northern province. The breathtaking event brightens up each January with fireworks and exquisitely carved illuminated ice and snow sculptures. Weddings here are a very traditional affair, with fairy tale dresses more suited to warmer climates. A further reminder of the dilemma tourism poses to the environment came in 2019 on Thailand's Koh Phi Phi Island, when authorities had to close a picturesque bay.
It was clean and full of fishes, and we can make a great snorkeling there.
In Costa Rica, a community project run by local women is teaching visitors from across the world how to produce organic food. The Huanilama Reserve Tourism Project began as a conservation project 19 years ago, and it aims to protect the forest against logging and poaching.
Good for us to be involved with people and see the real Costa Rica.
Below the shafts of an abandoned silver mine in Andalusia, Spain, a cavity of rock filled with crystal has been a sensation. It is expected to change the fortunes of the small town Phi Phi that lies above it. Visitors first have to walk down the long, dusty mine shaft before heading down newly installed metal staircases which take them through the vast caverns of the mine.
And a final look at the markets today. Let's take a look at what happened in currency trade. There's a mixed day for currencies. South Africa's rand held on to some of the modest gains it made at the close of the year. The Kenyan shilling had been going strong through the festive season. Reports had indicated that was largely due to Kenyans working abroad sending money home. Today, though, the shilling took a slight hit and shed almost 0.4%. And that's a wrap of your markets update for today. Well, thank you so much for joining us. That's it for this edition of Global Business. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. From me, Hannah Viviers, and the rest of the Global Biz team, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next time.